Comic.
Why so serious?
What?
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
Logic.
Dance off, bro! Me and you!
Comic. What? Logic.
For thousands of years, they have existed among us.
You keep your eyes open. They're everywhere. Chances are you've seen them yourself and didn't know it.
A secret nation
Our livelihood depends on our ability to blend in.
with a lust for power.
We should be ruling the humans. These people are our food.
They've got their claws into everything. Politics, finance, real estate. There's a war going on out there. He makes the weapons. I use them.
Now, one will lead them to conquer mankind,
Tonight, the age of man comes to an end.
We're gonna be gods.
and one will try to stop him dead.
There are worse things out tonight than vampires.
Like what?
Like me.
Show that we're starting!
That's how the podcast will start. It's just us screaming.
Well, I don't know. I've always kind of noticed that it's always just me announcing whatever part of the podcast we're on.
Yeah. Production notes.
Production notes! Okay, so to start off, everybody, welcome to Comic Book Logic. I'm your host, Joe, and with me, as always, is my co-host... what's his name?
Blade.
Blade. You gotta have some big cojones to go by a nickname like Blade.
What's the matter with you?
Exactly. It's like the only other person I can think of is like The Edge from U2.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, your nickname's Edge? No, it's The Edge.
The Edge.
Yeah.
Do you think he calls himself that? Like, do you think he named himself that, or was it like you were to call you the Edge now because of, I don't know, his guitar? I'm not really sure why he's the Edge, but he must have just been like, you guys are gonna call me the Edge now.
Yeah, I mean, we're
not calling you Edge. No, I didn't say that. I said the Edge. 2 words, people.
And it's not even as good as like Sting.
Flag off.
It's like Sting, who's like,
yeah,
it's like, no, I am the Edge.
I'm the Sting.
There could be many edges, but I am the Edge. Yeah.
There are many edges like it, but this one is mine.
This one. Oh, Stanley Kubrick's Blade. So anyway, welcome to Comic Logic. Today we are going over our second of our Halloween movies. Woo. Last time we did Hellboy. This time we're doing Blade, 1998's Blade.
Neither of which very scary.
No,
I
not
gotta
really
say, not horror movies.
Yeah.
By any stretch.
Yeah, I probably couldn't sit through 30 Days of Night one more time.
Yeah, once was enough.
Yeah,
for that.
Did we see that together? I
we
think we
did.
Yeah.
I think see that together. And it was like only a couple of us in the theater, and I remember we were making a lot of jokes, and so were the other people.
I can't deal with Josh Hartnett post 2003, so
Ugh.
yeah. So anyway, Kevin, we're gonna start off this podcast like we start off every podcast. What did you know about Blade?
In 1998, I probably didn't even know that Blade was a comic book character.
Let's set the scene. Year was 1998.
William Jefferson Clinton was halfway through his second term.
William Jefferson Clinton was being impeached for the worst crime a president could ever do, lying under oath. There will never be a worse president, Kevin.
No.
Ever.
That is where the line is.
Yeah.
Lying about sex.
A young Joe was working at a mini golf course on the south side of Chicago, wearing rayon shirts.
Rayon shirts. Listening to ska. Listening to ska punk.
Thinking that it could never get better than this.
Wearing pants that were way too wide.
Big. Yeah. Could fit homeless people under those.
You always had to check. You had to, before you put your Jinkos on, you had to be like, the homeless are living in there.
It was the 90s economy. We didn't have homeless. Everyone was doing great.
That's true. Trickle-down economics finally worked.
All right, so Blade was actually a character from 1973. He's one of the newer characters. Could you guess what genre of movies they created him from? Like Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan, when they were writing this character, they were like, I'm going to take inspiration from a type of movies. Can you take a guess what those were, Kevin?
I'm going to go with something exploitation.
Yeah. You're pretty right. No, actually, he was created in the comic book Tomb of Dracula, which was a Dracula-centered comic, and he was just a vampire hunter. He was black in the comics. Originally created, he was pretty much you don't find too much that says specifically that it's because of blaxploitation, but it was because of blaxploitation. you look at the character like, yeah, I get it. I mean, he looks like Shaft in the comics. Originally,
this movie was nowhere near as funky as it should have been then.
No, there was not enough funk in this movie. It was in the late 90s. The 90s had no funk.
No, it was all just terrible garbage electronic music is what it was.
Oh, we're going to talk about the Aphex Twins. So, Blade was originally created in 1973. Standard vampire hunter character. He was always showing up, just like whenever a vampire would show up, he would be like, "Oh, Blade's gonna show up in this issue, I bet." Yeah. And he would have his appearances in Spider-Man, and actually, one of the characters in the movie, Whistler, didn't show up until the 1990s in the Spider-Man cartoon. So in the Spider-Man cartoon from the 90s, I'm sure you remember that one.
Yes.
Yeah,
fondly.
Yes, fondly.
More fondly than I probably should.
Blade actually showed up in that cartoon, and he had his mentor, Whistler, who was created specifically for the cartoon. And they liked it so much that they actually brought it into the movie. Now, some of the things from the movie that weren't actually in the comic book, Blade did not have super strength, or he was not even half vampire like he is in the movie. He was a straight up just out for revenge, Dracula killing machine. You know?
Nice.
So there's a character on Venture Brothers which I know you don't watch.
I've seen. I don't watch it regularly, but I've seen a good deal of it, and it's a great show.
There's a character, and I can't remember his last name, but it's Jefferson something, and he's a Blackula hunter. He only hunts Blackulas, and it's kind of a direct homage of Blade and the original Blade from the 70s, not necessarily the Wesley Snipes like, "Do you understand, Blade?" Who's always grunting every word that he does.
Very good shape, that Blade.
He is. So anyway, he was, not actually a superhero, so to speak. He was just a normal dude. And so in the movie now, you have him being, well, essentially Wesley Snipes.
Yes. Yeah. Half vampire, half Wesley Snipes.
So the movie Blade, Kevin. The movie Blade, which I had a lot more fun watching than I care to admit that I had fun watching. So this movie came out in 1998. This is pre-Matrix, by the way.
Yes. No, I know. I said that while we were watching the movie. I said to my wife, I was like, I really want to watch The Matrix now. It's basically like, this is like almost like a weird vampire-oriented prequel to The Matrix just because of the look and feel of it.
Well, let's start at the beginning. I mean, the classic blood rave disco shower.
Oh, that's what every rave looked like in the late 90s. So I understand, like having heard about them from the internet and like Law and Order, Criminal Intent.
Oh, the only thing I remember is mosh pits at ska shows.
Exactly, right. You might have tripping over each other's big jeans,
getting kicked in the face with a pair of checkered Converse. Or shoes.
That's basically what everyone was doing in the late 90s. Is we were all listening to horrible loud techno and
thinking Tracy Lords was hot.
Thinking Tracy Lords was hot now that she was of age, and look that one up, kids. And going to raves and meat lockers. That's what we did.
Pretty much.
I said in the last segment, we just talked about the music again. There is some good stuff on this soundtrack. It's all the like the late 90s hip hop is great. There's Gangstar on this soundtrack. There's Mobb Deep on this soundtrack. But then there's just like Junkie XL and just like oh, couldn't do it then, can't do it now.
The system is down. The system is down.
Somehow that stuff managed to age worse than I even expected that it would back then.
And the funny thing is that nowadays you sit there and go, "Oh man, this dubstep is terrible."
Yeah.
Then you're like, "Wait a second, we weren't listening to anything better in the 90s."
It's all dubstep in one form or another.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's a very famous scene. It's strange that like just in this Halloween there was something that like I guess some disco or rave party in Germany is doing a blood shower for Halloween.
Oh.
And they specifically mentioned the blood shower from Blade is going to be reenacted in Germany. And I'm like, really? That's still a thing, huh?
Well, Germany, yeah. I mean,
they just got Blade 3 years ago. So.
If If any country, it doesn't surprise me that they're going to, that they have blood shower parties. I mean, that sounds like just a normal party in Germany.
Well, yeah, they don't like bringing up showers in Germany ever. That's a big no-no there. No, Germany. What? It's just a shower. It's got blood. Why do you sound Russian? I don't know.
We're mixing our accents here.
Yeah.
It's a little early.
Yeah, and we're drinking, so it's one of those podcasts, people.
Don't give it away.
I'm sorry.
I've only had a couple sips, so I'm still just good. Anyway.
I'm 1.5 down. So
it's 11:30 in the morning here.
yeah, and I was actually making fun of you for morning drinking the other day.
I'm telling you, I needed something to wash down my 10 a.m. bratwurst, and what better than a 10 a.m. beer?
In case you can't tell, we're from the Midwest. All right,
This is the thing that we do here.
Yeah. So anyway, we have the opening shower scene, of course, and Tracy Lords is, bringing the guy in and, tempting him into some sort of weird vampire shower sex thing.
Yeah, it's the only human, I guess, which I thought was a little weird.
Yeah, and so he's there, and they're like, oh, good, one human for 5,000 vampires that are there.
Donal Logue is in the corner getting a beej.
Yeah, which is really weird.
Just a very distressing scene, but God, I've said this before. I love Donal Logue. I get so excited when he's in a movie.
This is the second. He's 2 podcasts in a row. He's come up.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's weirdly in this movie as like a vampire thrall or whatever they call him, like a sub vampire, whatever. And then Blade shows up, and as soon as it's one of those things like it's like what are all you people are dead? They're like, no, we're not dead. We're vampires.
Yeah.
They do that blah hiss, and everybody's like, ah. And then Blade shows up, and I don't know who you should be more afraid of: the vampires trying to kill him, or Blade, who has a reckless use of firearms in an enclosed environment.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, his bullets are special magic silver bullets filled with garlic extract. Or essence of garlic.
Essence of garlic, which actually also works great on pasta.
Oh yeah.
You just crack one of those bullets open, you spread it a little bit with a little aioli.
It's great. It's great.
fantastic.
Use that instead of extra virgin olive oil sometimes.
Yeah,
You get a nice sauce.
Spices up your cooking. Yeah, and then you pour yourself a nice Chianti, and it's all good. But anyway, yeah, he starts recklessly shooting everyone in there. Now, one of the things that really shocked me about this movie while watching it is they drop the F-bomb so much in this movie.
Which rated R. It gets an R rating, and so there's no when you have an R rating or prior to an R rating, if you want to go PG-13, there's a set number. You can have like
PG
one F-bomb, I think.
And The Martian got 2.
Oh yeah, and they bleeped out a lot.
Yeah, so
they ended up bleeping out quite a few of them, and they didn't show them on the screen.
Yeah, so they only got 2 in The Martian. So.
But I think it's generally 1, and this one was like, do it, go R rating,
which is something that you're not used to in comic book movies. So
right?
To speak,
It's graphic, it's bloody. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's like overly gross. I mean, there's some gross scenes, particularly the deaths, the vampire deaths.
Some of them...
Some were fine. See, that was a complaint that I had about the movie. There were a few sort of minor complaints that add up to it being just a mixed bag for me. But one of them is just something that bothers me a little bit, that the vampire deaths were all wildly inconsistent. It seemed like sometimes they would just turn into like dust and fizzle out. Sometimes they would I think it depended on how he was killing them.
Yeah, probably whatever he used.
But at the same time, it was like sometimes they exploded, sometimes they fizzled, sometimes they're skeletons.
Yeah.
Sometimes little winged skeletons came out of their human skeletons and flew around.
And sometimes they were killed by bad CGI.
Most of the times they were killed by really bad CGI.
It was the late 90s.
It was that horrible spot where it was like post, Jurassic Park and pre-Matrix, when I think CGI got a little bit better and they put a little bit more into it. Very reliant on CGI. Some of the stuff, especially in the climax, you can always tell it's always toward the end of the movie because they try to make it bigger, and so they use more CGI.
Yeah.
But I also think that sometimes that's because their effects budget's running out.
Could be.
And so
could be.
start trying to we're gonna do this, but then it ends up looking like a weird car insurance ad on daytime TV on one of the local channels.
I'm kind of glad I watched this in low def and not the Blu-ray. So
yeah, I streamed it on. Did you stream it on HBO Go as well? Yeah, that actually helped. It was wireless, and so
yeah, you could. It's it was a little grainy. Kind of looked like I was watching it on VHS.
Yeah, Blu-ray would not have done this movie any favors.
It was a good night with me and my wife. I was like VHS and chill. So good. No, so yeah, the beginning you start off. You have Blade, and he saves this kid who he obviously should have let die because he's not going to do anything with his life. But it turns out that in fighting, he sets Donal Logue on fire.
Yeah, that was very confusing to me. He was like, I've tried to kill you before, but you keep coming back. I'm going to set you on fire. And then he gets interrupted by the cops, so he leaves.
He gets interrupted by inept cops.
Yeah. Put him out.
Yeah.
And then they put him out, and then that's it.
Yeah. There's not one cop who's shocked by the fact that there's gallons and gallons and gallons of blood and a flaming corpse.
Well, they own the cops, so obviously.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. I was thinking that at the beginning. I was like, man, these cops are terrible.
Yeah.
And then it's vampire lives, # vampire lives matter, man. But then the vampires, I would be, as a cop, I'd be like, oh my God.
Right. It smells so bad.
And they're like, that's not even from the blood. That's just from the late 90s rave kids.
Oh, yeah. That's just BO and ecstasy.
BO, ecstasy, and maybe X body spray, which was just coming into the use at the time.
Ooh.
Yeah. BO and ecstasy. I believe that's a drug now.
Yeah.
Isn't that what MDA is?
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah, so that leads to the next scene, which is, of course, in the hospital where we meet the heroine of the movie, who I don't even remember her name. Was it Jenny or something like that?
I believe I wrote it down. I think it's Karen.
Karen?
Karen.
What'd you do with the drugs, Karen?
I flushed it.
That was all we had. Let's just review Goodfellas.
Let's just switch it up. We're going to do Goodfellas. And welcome to Martin Scorsese logic.
Oh,
so
if we just put everything at a 1.5 speed, we'd all just sound like Martin Scorsese.
I think the biggest, so this movie
Her name
wasn't
is Karen.
This movie wasn't funny enough for me. That was, I think, the biggest problem. It had its moments. There were a few funny moments. The hospital scene has a funny moment. Really, the first time I laughed during the movie, and I think it's the first time you're supposed to laugh. It's the first sort of funny scene, is where the sort of rent-a-cops show up to shoot at Blade in the hospital. And he turns around and he goes. That's one of the first F-bombs. I think he says something like what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And then they just run away. He just turns and he's like, really? You guys are shooting at me?
Yeah.
And I laughed at that, but it was just, I really thought that this movie takes itself way too seriously.
Well, you got to remember, this is a David Goyer script. So
who wrote all three of them?
Wrote all three of the Blades. He also,
Blade and Batman Begins.
All the Batmans.
Blade Begins.
And the Man of Steel. So as we know, he's very
not into the humor.
He's not into the humor at all, as we see by every comic book movie he's ever written, except for Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was a 1998 made-for-TV movie that was only played on the Sci-Fi Channel, starring David Hasselhoff as Nick Fury. Awesome. That one wasn't taken quite as seriously, but this movie definitely took itself very, very seriously, and it's actually very interesting because his initial draft of the Blade script was a comedy. It was a spoof, essentially.
And it should have been, and that movie would have been much more interesting to watch.
Yeah, probably. I enjoyed it. I thought there were certain things that I really liked. For example, not only the movie has a really good, and I have to credit the director. I think his name is Norrington.
Yeah, who's only got a couple of credits to his name, including League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which please don't make me watch.
Oh, we're gonna watch that one day. But yeah, this movie, I think, directing wise, it's a very well directed movie. And
really,
yes. And the reason why I say it's a very well directed movie is because I think he does a very good job of balancing the very fast cut action sequences, with the techno music, but yet when it slows down. It does slow down. It's not very jumpy. He lets characters talk. He lets them kind of look at each other and interact, which you don't normally get a lot of. You get a lot of single shot camera of like a character, and then it goes to the other character when they're talking.
Right.
This one they actually interact together quite well, and it's pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah, when I was watching the movie, I was really like what this is terribly directed. I
thought it was terribly directed?
Really right, but later I thought about it and I realized that, to your point, I agree that the fight scenes were very well choreographed, which I don't necessarily credit the director for, because usually there's
like a stunt coordinator,
there's usually someone
fight
who will,
choreographer,
right. I mean, there are movies that do that better than others. Mostly this was adequate. I wouldn't say it was spectacularly choreographed, but like a movie like John Wick is spectacularly.
Well, you can't go by the gold
choreographed.
Standard of.
What's the new? I think that is the new gold standard.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But even if you look at, looking at movies of the time, I mean, The Matrix would be an even better version of that. But that also was very reliant on effects as well. But I think that some of that was good, and I think that some of the slower scenes were good. I think what didn't work for me was there were so many super bizarre choices that he would make as a director, where there were scenes where we would just cut away to something.
Yeah, I did notice
and then
that.
you cut back and you're like, nothing even changed in the scene. I don't know why we cut away. I don't even know what we cut away to. And
I noticed one or two of those.
There were very bizarre, just the way things would get framed. I was just like, why are we looking at your weird art movie? Like,
I thought there was some very clever framing in the movie.
Yeah, no, it was interesting framing. I wouldn't necessarily call it clever, but I would say it was definitely interesting.
Okay, well, I mean, we can agree to disagree on that. I kind of like that. I actually felt like, in comparison to a lot of the Marvel movies, it was actually better directed than a lot of them. A lot of the newer ones, 2005. I thought this was actually much more. I think it could easily fit into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You could take this and put it into Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I don't think you would have a major issue. I think it would work perfectly well. I mean, I think that
the vampires would be aliens now, but sure.
Yeah. Well, Blade, you never know. It could be vampire aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
They would have to.
Yeah. So that's where we're back at the hospital scene. Of course, Donal Logue pops up and he bites Karen and turns her into a vampire.
Yeah.
And then Blade comes and rescues her and takes her back to his headquarters, where we get to meet the greatest character of all time,
Kris Kristofferson.
God damn it, Blade! What you bringing a meat slab into here for?
Oh man, if that wasn't going to be Gary Busey, thank God it was Kris Kristofferson. That's the second best option for that character.
To this day, people I know and hang around with quite regularly still quote Whistler from Blade. We still go around saying, "God damn it, Blade!" It's so amazing. What in the world was the choice to have Kris Kristofferson, the country singer Kris Kristofferson, play this character? I don't want to say that he's vain, but he probably thinks this movie's about him.
Nice.
Yes. Yeah.
Or Nick Nolte. Nick Nolte now would be a fantastic Whistler in the new updated version of Blade.
And if he's not too busy killing horses off. That's a dated reference already.
I still wish we got a second season of that show. That was a great show.
What was it called again?
Luck. It's great.
I thought, but yeah. So I mean, this sets up the whole thing of where we find out the majority of the plot. Blade and Whistler are hunting down Deacon Frost.
Yeah.
Who is played by one of my favorite actors who never shows up at anything because he's too 90s.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name right now.
I don't even know his name. We'll have to look, because I really didn't recognize him.
Stephen Dorff. I opened up my phone and it came to me. Stephen Dorff. He just reminds me of the really scummy guy that you'd see in a bar in like the 90s, like going to pick up chicks, like just drugged out of his mind at all times, like just slobbering in alcohol. But you know what? It's Stephen Dorff. Not a bad actor. Just it's like
no, he was great. He reminded me of like
what Christian Slater could have been.
A little bit if he'd stopped doing Jack Nicholson impressions long enough.
Exactly.
Yeah. No. he was great. I had no issue with him. And I loved I loved Kris Kristofferson, and I got a real clear sense of his motivation. I think that was another issue I had with this movie, that I didn't really have a clear sense of Blade's motivations.
Yeah.
Other than, like, I mean, I guess
They
I
killed
get it.
my mother.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I get it in the context of that. It's like he says, "Oh, I found him on the streets, and he was starting to, drink homeless people's blood, and so he was being a vampire," which I guess was fine, but it just seemed like his only motivation was because, like, Kris Kristofferson raised him
Pretty
to
much.
do that, and it was like, okay, but so then it's just, then it should have been almost about that character, about Whistler's character, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it would have made more sense for him to be more of the lead in that case, because that relegates Blade to just, like, his weapon.
Yeah, that's where, like, the Hellboy thing that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Like how Hellboy is just or Cronin is just a weapon, or Hellboy is just a weapon of the BPRD.
Right.
But Blade is, and in a lot of ways, Blade is just. There was a weird thing in the 90s, like late 90s, when we'd have heroes like Jet Li who would just show up in something just to kick people.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't really have any motivation. We just watched it to see Jet Li kick people,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what this movie is. We're watching this movie to see Wesley Snipes use his samurai sword to kill vampires.
Sure.
To turn vampires into ash, apparently.
Cut their hands off, turns their hands into ash, but then their hands grow back.
Yeah, which is, okay, I guess.
Sure.
Why not?
I got 2 new hands.
They're part salamander.
I got 2 new hands, Blade.
Yeah, so they start carrying on a treatment of vampire drugs, anti-vampire drugs, which is mainly just garlic extract, which I take for my heart. So
Yeah.
it just prevents me from turning into a vampire. Apparently,
That's good.
Yeah, it keeps my heart.
You
beat regular.
still don't go out in the sun, though. I'm not
No,
sure it's
well,
working.
I'm just that white. That's I can't. I'm like when the Deacon Frost is out in or Udo Kerr's out in the sun, he starts smoking. That's another person we haven't talked about is Udo Kier in this movie.
He's great. I love the whole illustration of, like, the vampire, like, League of Vampire,
League of Extraordinary Vampires
board.
Yeah,
like the vampire board. Although I think Deacon Frost has a really good point about why aren't they ruling the planet? Like, this version of vampires doesn't, because I said that to my wife because we were watching it together, unfortunately for her, and she was like, you don't want to be, maybe it's this case of, like, since the humans are their prey, they don't want to reveal themselves, they want to hunt. And I said, well, I mean, but that's what we did for a while until we domesticated everything.
Yeah.
And now we basically farm and raise our food. Like, they
Deacon
could
Frost doesn't
clearly
want to
do
be
the
fed.
same
Deacon
thing.
Frost wants to hunt.
I guess that's probably what it comes down to.
They put up the big cage with a human, and then it's just then it's like dun dun dun.
What's going to happen to the human? Is he going to eat the human? I happen to be a vegetarian.
It's a veggie vampire, Lex.
I made a Jurassic Park reference during this movie too. We both did when we kept seeing the '90s computer program.
Oh yeah, it's a Unix system.
And we looked at each other and said exact things. Unix. I know this. It's a
Unix
Unix system.
No one could have made those graphics on their home computer back in 1998. It's physically impossible.
I didn't understand any of that.
Well, it's very World of Darkness, Vampire the Masquerade going on with that boardroom scene. It's very like oh, there's a secret shadowy society that's ruled by ancient vampires. But that's the thing is these vampires live forever, so they're just like, no, we made this decision back in 1684. We're sticking with it, man.
We just can't get the votes to overrule it. It's no one really wants to give up their 401k.
Hey, what? John Boehner stepped down? All right, well, we might be able to get this through now. I'm not a vampire. Well, it's so Vampire the Masquerade where it's just like it just reminds me of a bunch of like goth kids hanging out down at the local park playing vampire, and you're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
Vampires never did anything for me, like in terms of horror movies. I was always like, I like werewolves. I like.
See, but what great there aren't that many.
There's not that many, but
great I mean, there are some great werewolf movies.
Yeah.
Do not get me wrong, but
there's not that many great vampire movies either. And I know you hate Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, but there's not many great vampire movies. I mean, Fright Night is probably one of my favorites.
Well, let's not get ahead of
Oh,
ourselves.
damn it!
here.
I forgot. It's yeah. But anyway, yeah. There's not that many great ones. But yeah, I'm a vampires never really did anything for me. So that's why I'm like looking at this. I'm like, oh, goth kids.
Yeah.
Get off of my lawn, you damn goth kids. I can't take a girl on a date and walk through the park at night without seeing your chubby selves pretend to be invisible. You know, dear. I have issues.
This is not. I don't know if this is a thing that happens anymore. It must still be.
It doesn't really happen
anymore.
anymore.
They happen. They're at the mall now, I guess.
Well, if you really want to know the truth, and this is a little bit of a Game Classy crossover, it's that White Wolf, the people who were doing Vampire the Masquerade, pretty much destroyed their entire fan base back in like mid 2000s when they did this whole event called Gehenna and just destroyed the entire vampire werewolf world that they had built up and reset the timeline, and everyone hated it, and so everyone dropped it. So not many people were playing it anymore. Anyway, back to the movie.
I don't even know what any of that is that you just said.
Well, I said it.
It sounds terrible.
Yeah, pretty much. So we do have Udo Kier, who's famous German actor. I don't really even know what he's done aside from the one Iron Skies. I know he was in Iron Skies.
Ooh.
And he was also in Rob Zombie's Werewolf Women of the SS. So the fake trailer from Grindhouse.
Right.
But yeah, they did this whole vampire thing, and Deacon Frost is trying to decipher these pages so that he can unleash the Blood God.
The Blood God.
Yeah.
And basically be king of the vampires.
Yeah.
And ruler of the planet, basically, by extension, by definition.
Because he's king of the vampires.
Sure.
You know, why not? It's not like he can be killed easily once he becomes king of the vampires. Oh, wait.
No, I don't want to get out of the context of the movie, but I haven't seen it, so I'll just mention it briefly. But I know to tie it a little bit to last time, talking about Guillermo del Toro, who directed Blade 2.
Yeah.
I have to assume, and I'm sure you've seen it.
Oh yeah.
That Blade 2 is a much funnier movie, or it's looser and a little bit takes itself a little bit less seriously. Just I have to assume with Del Toro at the helm. Not really.
I wouldn't even say that. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I don't really remember it being that funny. I remember that there are very interesting parts of it, and I remember it being a much more interesting movie.
This movie came in 1998.
Yes.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer was on.
Was it?
By now. Its first season was 1997. So, I mean, there was probably, in terms of when they were producing it and actually shooting it, there was probably, it's not like they sat and, I'm not saying one influenced the other or really could have influenced the other, but it should have, because I think that by the time that
Well, Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie had already come out at this point.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true, and that's a fun one. But I think that we had a sense at the time, and even now, like, I think if this movie was made now, you would see it would be a very different kind of movie. Even Marvel Cinematic Universe notwithstanding, even if this ended up having nothing to do, if this was, you know, one of the non-MCU Marvel movies, like the Spider-Man,
Fantastic Four,
like it could still have like a different tone. It would still be a very different, funnier, sort of looser movie. As it was, I had a lot of. It did a lot of things differently than Hellboy. Not that they're related, but just because we talked about it, it was in terms of like a origin story of sorts. It's not even really an origin story. No, because
all of his origin was the opening scene where the woman where his mom comes in, and then he gets born, and then he.
So it drops us right, but like Hellboy, it sort of drops us right in the middle for the most part, except for the intro. It drops us right in the middle of like. Hellboy's doing his thing. Blade's doing his thing. He kills vampires.
You know what?
Get to see that, and that's fine.
Maybe it's because Blade was raised by Whistler is the fact that he never says more than 3 words at a time.
And doesn't have any real casual wear.
No.
Even when he just goes to the store, like that guy who's in one scene who he buys the garlic from, I guess.
Yeah.
We don't really get to see him much.
Yeah.
That was pointless.
He's just a runner.
Basically. You know?
And the whole thing is that Blade is trying to stop Deacon Frost. Like that's his whole purpose.
Right. We've been trying to kill him for a while, but he also because he kills vampires in general.
Yeah.
And so what was
his
the
hobby.
deal with the great big fat
Pearl
rubber person?
Well, Pearl.
What's the deal with that? Why was that even a thing?
I think that they were just trying to track down.
No, but why was that character like that?
Oh,
What
I
was
just-
was that?
I just think it was a fun, weird, grotesque thing. Why not?
I didn't understand it at all.
Well, I mean, it was just the big, crazy, fat vampire.
Okay.
Why not?
Why though?
I don't know. Do you? Really? But that's the
I mean,
whole
is
thing.
it from the comic?
I don't really know off the top of my head if Pearl's from the
Yeah.
comics. But I like weird things like that, especially in horror movies. Like, I like the grotesque. I would much rather see something like that than Donal Logue without, can walk around being Donal Logue. In reality, I think Pearl is much easier to deal with on the eyes than Donal Logue. But the... Okay. Oh, but poor Donal Logue. But that's the whole thing is like...
As president and founder of the Donal Logue fan club, I have to object.
Donal Logue Fan Club, Chapter 362.
Mm-hmm.
There's 364 members. The whole thing is I like that. I remember that scene when I
It
first.
was just such a non sequitur, and it's like I don't care if there's like a silly non sequitur in a movie as long as like I can understand why the scene is there.
Well-
and I can't frame the scene in anything
the
that
scene
makes
is there
any sense.
because he's chasing the guy with the blood bag.
No, I'm not saying why the scene, but like why that character was like that in the scene. Like as long as I can sort of put it in the context of the film, I could be like, wow, that's super goofy. But like, there's nothing else like that in the movie.
I think I agree with you there. I like the concept of having super creepy, crazy looking, grotesque things like Pearl. But on the other hand, I would have liked to have seen more of that in the movie. And I know there's more of that in Blade 2.
Yeah.
There's a lot more weird. That's Del Toro. It's a lot of more weird. It's a lot more of the grotesque.
Yeah.
And I agree that the Pearl scene is a little out of place, just in terms of who Pearl is. But I just love that makeup, and I think it looks so...
It was fun seeing a very cool, weird, practical...
Yeah, and it was goofy, and at the same time, it was like... It
reminded me of Slither.
Yeah,
also,
a little bit.
Which was much, much later, but anything like that.
It reminded me of Monty Python and the Meaning of Life.
Yeah, there you go.
Waffle thin mint. But yeah, I would, and I like the high pitched voice and everything. I thought it was fun, and there should have been more of that in this movie.
I think if there was more, I wouldn't have an issue with it because I would be like, oh, that's just the tone of this movie. But it wasn't at all.
No, I'll agree with you there. And there was this movie was all about swearing and beating up women.
So I mentioned my wife watches, and your wife watches with you as well. But my wife
is
my wife watched it. I think she sort of started to tune out toward the end, but we're watching the scene, and I think it was right before that scene where Blade and Karen are kind of going down sort of the staircase, and my wife is like, I wish that she was more like badass. Right? Like more of a badass character.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I go, she didn't know anything about any of this until this morning. And now she and Blade are going down this staircase to find out about vampires, and she has a huge gun and is just like, okay, we're going to go and do this. I was like, how much more badass could she possibly be at this point in the movie?
You would be
She was like, yeah, okay, that's she's pretty good.
You're like Kristen, you'd be curled up in a ball crying for 7 hours.
So would I, frankly. I would just be
vampire.
like, vampires, no, ah!
I'd be like, so what kind of vampires are we dealing with here? Is this like a Salem's Lot situation, or
what works, what doesn't work, how much of the legends are true? Let me get my checklist out.
Yeah.
Okay, crucifixes are out. Garlic is in. Got it.
Crucifixes are so last season.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, they of course it's Deacon. The whole thing is that Deacon Frost needs.
Call me Deacon Frost.
He needs the Daywalker blood. Well,
I made it like an hour into this podcast before I
it's-
referenced Steely Dan, so be proud of me.
So Blade is doing. Blade is a Daywalker. That's like a word that they use here.
Yeah.
Because
although he's not really, he's just basically roided up, and that allows him to deal with it.
Yeah. He's essentially a vampire that could go out in the day.
Yeah.
He's like a vampire with none of the vampire weaknesses.
Right.
And so they're Daywalker.
Yeah.
And so he
Basically, you just summarized this movie in one affectation. That's the whole movie. This could have been a very short podcast if we just done that.
Daywalker.
That's it. That's the whole movie.
And yeah, so the whole thing is they need Daywalker blood to resurrect the blood god.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the Bloodwalker's god's name is. It's like Misha or something.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
specifics in this movie that don't really matter.
Yeah. And so they finally Blade tracks down Deacon Frost and he finds that his mother is still alive as a vampire in a really creepy Oedipal scene.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's
That was something.
That was something else. But the weird thing is like Blade's mother technically died when he was an infant. How the hell would he even know who she is?
Yeah. Well, he has her driver's license.
Yeah,
we
that's
see
true,
that
yeah.
briefly.
Yeah.
So he knows what she looks like. But then she, I
also
think,
knows her
him.
height, weight, and eye color.
She's right.
And his her social security number.
I know who she was. Her social security number was 894-32846.
I don't know who his social security number is.
I think you need one more number.
Oh, well, that prevents me from getting sued.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could have been anybody's. There are 10 people out there whose social security number you almost read.
Yeah. So they're you have the social security number, that's what he has of her, and yet just get this really creepy
Yeah, so I guess
scene.
it would be right. It would be not as creepy, but it was still a little disturbing.
You know, you look exactly like my mother.
I am your mother, Blade.
What?
There'd be too much. I've said more lines as Blade than Blade has in this entire film. This entire flim.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then so he allows himself to be caught, and his blood is drained, which brings they kill off all the vampire leaders, and that leads to the resurrection of the CG blood god.
Very handy, by the way, that you let Deacon Frost kill all the other vampire leaders, and then you kill Deacon Frost.
Yeah.
And now you're good. We
Yeah.
don't really have that much left to do.
I'm
And yet
going
there's still
out
2
to
more movies.
Applebee's.
So yeah, so they resurrect the blood god. Blade basically gets free. Karen, who
she climbs her way out, and I love the scene that cracked me up where they put her down in the dungeon,
pit.
and then the other Emmy is there, who she apparently had this sort of
Relationship,
dated
yeah.
at some point, sort of had a relationship. In the beginning, she's like, I don't want to hear anything about us, and then of course he's like, have you ever thought about us? And
Yeah.
she gets annoyed with him. So then when she sees him again at the end of the movie as, I guess, a vampire, but like a weird, in a dungeon monster vampire, like somehow
like very
different,
Renfield-esque vampire.
yeah, very weird, creepy feel to him.
Nosferatu.
He kind of comes out and he's like, "Do you ever think about us?" And I lost it because I was like, "See, that's what I wanted more of in this movie. That tone would have been great. I didn't necessarily need it to be a comedy. I just thought that the movie should have taken itself less seriously."
Yeah, I could see that. I respectfully disagree, but I understand where you got with that. But yeah, so then she manages to get free of that, frees Blade, and I think it's weird that he's in love with a woman that kind of looks like his mom. I don't want to say they look exactly like, but there's some similarity.
Sure, I feel like that may have been a thing. It may have been intentional a little bit in the casting.
It could have been. And so so now Blade has to fight. He fights off everyone. He manages to kill Donal Logue, much to Kevin's chagrin. And of course, even though Blade has drop kicked 4 women in this entire movie, like literally beat the hell out of 4 women, they're vampires, so it's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Hashtag
Well, they were
vampires matter.
right. No, they were gonna. Yeah. I'm okay with beating up vampires of either gender.
You're equal representation. But he can't kill Tracy Lords at the end. He's got to leave that to Karen to kill Tracy Lords.
Yeah.
This vampire who's like a top tier vampire, let's call her B class vampire, is going around like, but of course this woman who's only been exposed to this world for a day, is able to take her out. Whatever.
It's fine. She learns a lot. She does say she's a quick learner.
Yeah.
Obviously. There's not that much to vampire hunting.
Well, I mean, she's obviously the greatest, medical examiner of all time because she creates super like explodey hemoglobin stuff in no time flat and finds a cure for
hours at most.
Finds a cure for vampirism using retroviral DNA drugs.
Based on cures for or treatments for sickle cell anemia. So, I mean, a little on the nose, racially speaking.
I wasn't going to say that, but yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I get it, but it's also like,
well, I mean, there's
I mean, okay. I could argue that that's fine.
I
didn't think that was problematic for the movie, but it's worth mentioning that it's like her knowledge of sickle cell anemia treatments.
Well, I mean,
has to factor in.
She is like literally a blood doctor,
right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I understand. It's like I said, I understand sort of the context, but it is worth mentioning.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of
putting
weirds.
it out there.
There's a lot of weird, like vampire movies since the 1990s. There's always been like this weird STD subtext to vampirism, whether it's AIDS or.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that we could talk about this later if we want, but I think that, it's like anything where horror movies in general and then vampire movies more specifically tend to be, are a reflection of the times, right? So, early vampire movies, it was this spooky foreign thing. There would be this foreigner,
Eastern Europeans,
right? This foreigner, this Eastern European. I mean, they were Romanian for God's sakes. Would come over, and it would be, the British would be like, oh, this seductive evil foreigner.
He doesn't even know how to line up properly.
Manipulating our women and transforming them, and there's a bit of that.
He says he wants to have sex with our women. We don't even want to have sex with our women.
And so, you can skip ahead, and I think it makes a lot of sense as we've sort of figured out more about those kinds of diseases and kind of framed it in that way. There's always been sort of a sexual element to vampires in general because there's that seductive thing. There's, the what they do to the women. Like, that's always been a part of it. And so now that we know about the specifics of all these diseases, sure. I mean, we're going to frame it that way.
There's always
I like it.
Yeah, there's always this weird vampire. There's always this weird taboo when it comes to blood in especially in American culture. We have this weird. I would even say human cultures, like blood is always a very strange taboo that
Well, it frightens us.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an innate thing. I mean,
however, in movies we can see a lot more blood than we can see of nipples. Nipples.
Well, that's Well, we can.
Nipples terrify Americans.
That's a whole other subject that I don't think is right for this podcast, but right now. But yeah, we're in agreement there. Yeah, no, blood. That's a big thing about it too. Of something that all of those legends sort of come from that idea of something that feeds on your essence or your youth. Something about that.
I mean, I'll pull my college gender studies professor card out and be like, well, yeah, I mean, like even the act of vampirism is you're literally penetrating the individual and sucking out their life essence. It's very phallic and it's very sexual in and of itself. The act. I mean, at the end when Blade is being drained of his own blood, and then Karen comes in and she's like, "You have to bite me to regain your strength."
It was clearly like they were meant to be framed to be reminiscent of they were doing it. They were Marvin Gaying it all over the place. It was very clear there was thrusting involved.
There was thrusting.
No
there was
need to be
weird.
thrusting, but Wesley Snipes was going to thrust all over that girl.
We also forgot to mention that Deacon Frost finds Blade's lair and turns Whistler into a vampire.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's like, "God damn it, Blade! I'm turning into a vampire, Blade! God damn it! You gotta leave the gun.
God
leave
damn
the
it.
Walk away! Walk away!"
I think that was one of his songs that he was playing with the who was it? Was it the Outlaws?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you ever?
You're talking about the Highwaymen?
The Highwaymen.
Yeah.
Do you ever hear that song where he's like, where Kris Kristofferson's like, "I am the boat captain"? You ever heard that one?
No.
It's a weird ass song. The Highwaymen, not very good.
No, I love early Kris Kristofferson.
Well, yeah,
first.
But I mean, everyone in the Highwaymen,
first record,
fantastic.
Sure.
I mean, you got Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson and Kris Kristofferson.
They were the country rock version of the Traveling Wilburys.
Exactly, and the Traveling Wilburys only have like one or two good songs. As much as I might like that album, It's not a very good
That
album.
one album they have.
Yeah.
I think they might have two.
The second one is kind of like a weird. I think it's just studio sessions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not
They have
100%
one
sure.
proper album.
They have one proper album.
Volume
yeah.
1.
Yeah.
As if there were going to be more, and then there never was.
Yeah. Well, we need more Dwayne Allman in our lives.
Dwayne Allman wasn't in the.
Wasn't? I
no.
thought he was. Which of the Allman Brothers was in there? None of them.
No one.
No.
Mm-mm.
No.
No, it was Dylan. It was George Harrison. It was Jeff
Roy-
Lynne from ELO.
Yeah. Roy Orbison.
And Tom Petty. That's it.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking.
Yep.
Okay. I'll have to.
I got it.
I'll believe you. I thought there was another one, but I don't. Who knows? But anyway, let's get off the highwaymen. God damn it, Blade! I gotta kill myself, Blade. Walk away, Blade.
I think we should
Walk
sit
away.
here and talk more about the Allman Brothers. Eat a peach.
Yeah. Not the Peach, the Allman Brothers. So Blade ends up going and fighting Deacon
As I
Frost.
say, he saves the day.
Yeah,
he wins.
Well, I mean, he cut the thing that bothers me is there's this whole build up to how Deacon Frost is now the vampire god. He's the blood god.
He regenerates really, really fast. He cuts his torso in half, and then the CG blood goes
It
bubbly
reconnects
bubble,
it together,
and then it just comes back together. And he's like,
and
"I'm
the CG,
amazing now."
The CG in the scene is so laughable
Because it's pretty dated.
It looks like the Blob from the weird Matt Dillon version of the Blob.
Yeah.
You
No,
know
I know
what you're talking about. Yeah,
the '80s one.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. That like weird, like purplish jelly.
Yeah.
It's like I'm gonna put that on some peanut butter and have myself a sandwich. So yeah, and then it's like, oh man, and so Blade like throws up his sword, and his sword's got this like weird little spring mechanism.
The whole thing.
And it knocks down the super hemoglobin. Or whatever
his
it is.
cure, basically. The cure was up there.
It wasn't the cure though. That was what he used to kill the vampires.
Well, I thought that, but I mean, that was what it was. I think it's the cure if you've been bitten.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe I may or may not have that exactly right. It's possible I'm fudging the details. That's how I
a cure if you're
understood it.
bitten, but if you're
If
born
you're
a
just
vampire,
it just basically reverses you.
And it-
I don't know, out of existence. You explode.
Otherwise,
you get all bubbly and weird, almost like.
Big Trouble in Little China. When
I was
going to
say Total Recall, but yeah, Big Trouble
yeah.
is a little bit more accurate.
Yeah.
It just becomes a big.
Yeah.
Squishy monster, and then your head explodes.
And so
your head
he-
explode
it's
to make another home.
So Blade of course throws all of them at Deacon Frost, and even though he is the blood god, he still
it just overwhelmed his ability to regenerate.
he turns into Tetsuo from Akira.
I was gonna say, yeah, he becomes the Akira monster.
Tetsuo, Kaneda! And he explodes everywhere. And then Blade's like, I guess you could say I'm all done. And not even a clever pun. And then he ends. Then it ends. It's like and he ends up in Russia in a mirrored scene.
That's the end of that chapter.
Yeah. I still gotta kill me some vampires. Yeah. And then he goes to Russia because there's nothing more mysterious than Wesley Snipes walking around in Russia.
Everyone stops and just looks at him.
I mean, what? Like, let's face it. If he's in New York City and you see a guy dressed like Blade in New York City, you're just like, it's New York.
Well, how funny is it that
Greatest
he's in,
city on earth?
How funny is it that he's in like Chinatown and he's beating the shit out of the cop?
Yeah.
Like an actual cop in blue. He's beating the shit out of him and starts shooting a gun at him, and like no one says anything.
Yeah. They're just like, New York City, what are you going to do about it? Yeah, I'll take a foot long, put mustard on it.
I fold up my pizza in a roll.
I fold up my disgusting piece of dough you call pizza.
That's how we eat pizza here.
I like it cracker thin because you know what? I don't like to taste shit. That's what I'm saying. He's eating his...
I hope we have a big listener base in New York who just jumps on us. I'm certain we don't because we don't have a big listener base, period. But I really think that this is how we're going to do it.
New
if
York,
we just...
it's my kind of town. So what you gonna do about it? But yeah, if you saw a guy dressed like Blade in New York, you're not gonna blink an eye. I mean, like, but if you see a guy dressed like Blade in Russia, you're gonna be like, he's not wearing a tracksuit. There's something off.
He doesn't play for hockey team.
Where's tracksuit? Where's Adidas? Where's gold chains?
Where's gold chain?
He does not squat like a Slav. That's a thing, Slav squatting. Look it up.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah.
That's our Blade.
That's our Blade.
Come to think of it, Blade, I owe you one. Actually, if you want to get technical, Blade, I owe you 2. Oh, what's so funny, Bright Eyes?
I'm expecting company.
Catch you fuckers at a bad time.
All right, so some production notes. I mean, I'm just gonna hit some stuff that we didn't talk about in the previous section. Is that this movie was originally written, and I think it was 92 or 93. It was originally written as a spoof. I mentioned that in the recap. The studio wanted basically 3 people were up for the part of Blade, and that was Lawrence Fishburne, it was Denzel Washington, and Wesley Snipes. And Wesley Snipes, of course, got the part. Most of the other stuff is pretty on the nose when it comes to production. But it is worth noting that this is Marvel's first movie in the 1990s that was released in major theaters. You got to think there was a couple in production at the time, though. X-Men was in production, and so was Spider-Man.
What about the original Punisher, 1990? With Dolph Lundgren?
That was really early 90s.
I think it was 1990, but was that theatrical or was that TV?
I don't think it was TV. It may have been theatrical, but it might have been like one of those weird canon films that was like Jim Cotta. That wasn't.
But I think you're right. I mean, essentially that's the gist of it. Is this was sort of the first kind of major one?
Yeah, first major Marvel motion picture, especially in what I guess you can consider the comic book movie. It kind of was the movie that made it so that comic book movies could be marketable and they could be a success. Now, even though this movie is an R-rated movie, it still did incredibly well. I think it made twice its budget in domestic, and it made overseas more. I mean, Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars.
Sure.
Which Ebert's a good person to go off of because he's interesting. At least he doesn't have very.
Oh yeah, Ebert was always my guy.
Yeah, I just like him because he didn't have very traditional tastes. Because there would be movies that would just be like, why does he like this movie?
Yeah,
and
he definitely spanned. He was a big influence on me in terms of my approach to movies, where I can really get down and appreciate, art house and foreign and really kind of analyze the classics. But he's also okay with he understands what a movie like Blade is trying to do, and can frame it that way and go, okay, does it succeed on its own terms and do what it's actually setting out to do.
Yeah, but you got to look at it in terms of everyone. Rotten Tomatoes gave it's at a 55% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That seems fair.
Yeah, and this is movies that are pre-internet are very interesting on Rotten Tomatoes because a lot of times Rotten Tomatoes nowadays it's you're either at 100% or you're at 10%.
Right.
Because people there's a big hive mind when it comes to a lot of those reviews.
Yeah.
So in the 90s it was interesting because a lot of these critics are going out there and there was a very mixed bag when it came to a lot of this stuff. And it was a success. It was a very successful movie to spawn 2 other movies. Pre Marvel Cinematic Universe. And some would say that Blade 2 is better than the first one, and Blade 3 got Ryan Reynolds in it, so
He dressing all black, he mess up all cash, he got the raw facts to push them all back.
We don't deal with rapping, deal with strictly fractions. We be broadcasting sex, we rap. Yo, is this the money
right here? He got this he got this tableau, he got his dash on, so bring the best on.
We be slaying dragons,
Channel Live,
representing. We be long lasting, like them blunts with the
Yo, let me test this mic when I freshly write. We the best tonight, KRS, be tight with a Wesley Snipes. If you the best, be the lightning. We can be praying or we can be fighting. It could be damn, could be nighting. Whatever you saying, it better be writing. It can be exciting, but the fighting be frightening to the blacks and whites reciting our writing. Better we hike, not clash to the titan writing. Beyond verbal fighting, expressing a lesson in songwriting. Whether I'm right or wrong or both, I'm reciting the oath to be the most on both coasts. Whether I MC toast the host, I expose the logos. In my stand-up solos, yeah. Keep practicing, you're almost there. Never show no fear, cause I can never get near. See them get smeared as the crowd cheered. No, that's too weird. Don't be worried, don't be scared. I only shared what it's like to be prepared, cause I cared when you stared at me. You dared to be hip-hop, and it's rare, you don't get that. People are afraid to say this name in the game and represent the same, but they complain and complain, and they blame the corporations for their own situation.
Okay, so guys, this is gonna be a good one. Kevin usually takes the pick 3. He's like, okay, we're gonna do our pick 3 is gonna be this, and I've been doing the casting one, and I had some problems with this one because I was like, for the longest time I was struggling, like, what the hell am I gonna recast this as? The knee jerk reaction is go blaxploitation.
Right, do like a funky,
1970s
similar
one.
to the comics.
I don't know blaxploitation enough to make a good recast, and I don't think you know either.
I don't either.
Yeah,
no, I'm certainly on a scale of 0 to Tarantino. I'm pretty close to 0.
On a scale of Wes Anderson to Tarantino, you're a Wes Anderson.
Definitely, I'm a Wes Anderson on most scales.
Yeah, I'd consider myself more of a Jim Jarmusch on that scale, but yeah. So that was originally, but then I thought about it after watching the movie, and I said, you know what? Let's go just 10 years earlier, and let's do Spike. Let's make this a Spike Lee joint.
Yeah,
because I think that the movie Blade could lend itself well to what Spike Lee was doing in the 90s, which is very socially conscious movies that deal with issues of the inner city. And as we were talking about earlier, vampire movies are always about especially in the 90s, they're all about STDs and they're all about sex and the stigma around it. Essentially, it's like you have a bunch of people going around having mouth sex with each other, and a guy's out to stop them from having mouth sex with each other.
There's to jump off that, but also kind of change it a little bit. There's a version of this movie to be made now as well, in sort of you made reference to the Black Lives Matters movement, and the fact that they make it such a pointed thing that the police own the vampires own the police.
Yeah,
there's a great script to be mined here about framing the vampires and the police in the context of sort of an urban environment that I think, especially early Spike Lee, I mean, I feel like, I haven't kept up with him as much lately, but
I mean, his last great movie was Inside Man, so
I feel like he's gone a little bit off of that path, which, for better or worse, it is what it is, but I think that there's a movie that would really, really work there to be made now, but we're talking about going back 10 years earlier and doing about 1989, which is kind of when his first sort of great movie was made. Well, I shouldn't say that. School Days was probably his first great movie.
Well, I mean, She's Gotta Have It was 86. That movie wasn't bad.
That's true.
School Days was 88 and Do the Right Thing was 89. So that's why I picked like 89.
So we're kind of in that context. So
I mean, we don't necessarily have to do 89. I mean, like 90, 91. It's like
that's how I did it in terms of picking out. I drew a lot of inspiration for mine, not just on Spike Lee, but I also the late 80s and particularly the early 90s were a great time for Black independent cinema. Anyway, I shouldn't say John Singleton, but a little bit of that, a little bit of.
F. Gary Gregg came out, and he did
exactly
Straight Outta Compton. He did Friday, and it was the mid '90s. So
right. Yeah. But and Boys in the Hood was a big influence as well on sort of mine. So do you want me to start it out? Do you want me to start out with my Blade?
Sure, start off with your Blade. Who you got for Blade?
So it's funny, during the production note segments you mentioned who the other two picks for Blade were Wesley Snipes, who got it, were Denzel Washington and Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah.
So I actually have two Blades because I had an initial, if this was a Spike Lee joint in 1989, Spike Lee would probably play Blade.
That was like I was going to say the same exact thing.
Right. That was my initial, but I said, well, Lawrence Fishburne is the same age, just about. I think they're about a year apart. So I did go with Larry Fishburne. If you look at Lawrence Fishburne in 1990 in Boys in the Hood, if you look at that look as I forgot his character's name in Boys in the Hood. But if you look at him and you're like, yeah, you know what? That would be kind of amazing. No, that was Ice Cube. Ice Cube was Doughboy. No, he was the professor.
Yeah,
he was the teacher.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just can't remember his character's name. I think he would have a great time. He would be a little younger, obviously, but because he's the same age as Wesley Snipes is in real life, so 10 years earlier, he'd be 10 years younger than Wesley Snipes is in Blade. But I think that would be kind of a logical, Spike Lee would obviously cast him if he didn't cast himself. Yeah. And I think depending on which version that movie you go with, that frames it as potentially a very different movie.
Are you Blade? Why are you so small? You're tiny.
Exactly.
Mookie.
Mookie.
No,
Blade
and it's
Mookie.
Okay, I'm glad you went with Lawrence Fishburne because I went with Denzel.
Yeah, I mean he's the other sort of obvious one,
Yeah.
and it's funny that
Well,
those
the original
were the three.
I didn't mention this in production notes, but the when I was saying it was in production since '92, the script was originally written in '92. The original Blade, the original movie that Blade was written for, was LL Cool J.
Okay,
and he was like one of the ones I was actually thinking of, but I was like, he didn't really work with Spike Lee.
No.
Not that I could think of.
Yeah,
he may have at some point, but
I
not
don't
in any,
know offhand. So
not any. Like it's not
it
like
wasn't a lead role.
Yeah, I mean
if anything.
Denzel was in Mo Better Blues and
Sure.
I know he was in Inside Man,
Jungle Fever.
Jungle Fever. That's the other one.
Yep.
Wasn't Wesley Snipes?
Wesley Snipes was in that as well. Actually, Wesley Snipes might have been the one in that. I don't know if Denzel was in Jungle Fever. Now that I say that off the top of my head, but they definitely all work together. And Lawrence Fishburne was in virtually every single one of his movies going back.
I was also there was a well, I'll get into it after.
But
after
Denzel and Malcolm X anyway.
Malcolm X, of course,
the big one.
Who was robbed of his Academy Award for that movie. That movie was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, who did you do a Whistler?
I cast pretty much all the main characters.
Yeah.
My Whistler, I went with Ozzie Davis.
Ossie Davis. Okay,
Do the Right Thing.
I was thinking
the mayor.
I was thinking Ossie Davis.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to keep it kind of racially.
Sure.
Yeah,
I
racial
almost
parody
did.
on it.
I considered that.
Yeah, I went with Anthony Quinn.
You know what? Anthony Quinn was my original. That's right. That's so funny.
Because Anthony Quinn was in Jungle Fever.
Yes, that's who I was going to go with when I thought, let's make it, let's keep it racially cast. Like exactly what they did in Blade. Let's go ahead and keep if a character was black, if a character was white. I did. I went with Anthony Quinn originally, and then I decided to change it to Ozzie Davis and just keep it black.
Wasn't Ossie Davis also in Stephen King's The Stand?
He was, wasn't he? Yeah, he was
he's the judge.
No, he wasn't the judge. He was the judge was the guy guy from
My Favorite Martian.
and
Yeah,
Picket Fences, yes.
And Picket Fences.
I knew him at the time from Picket Fences. Yes, but from My Favorite Martian.
Yes.
Anyway,
but
God,
anyway.
How weird is it that 2 podcasts in a row we've referenced My Favorite Martian?
That is weird.
Very weird.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So yeah, it's that was my Whistler. I went with Anthony Quinn. Just it's
Ozzie
Anthony.
Davis,
It's
yeah.
Anthony Quinn. He's Zorba the Greek. What are you gonna do?
There you go.
Yeah.
Did you cast? Who else did you cast? Because I cast pretty much all the main characters.
I cast a lot. So who'd you put for your Karen?
My Karen is Rosie Perez.
You went with Rosie Perez. I went with Halle Berry.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Yeah, Rosie Perez was actually one of my. I was thinking about it as well, but however, I couldn't take Rosie Perez seriously as anyone in the medical profession, let alone.
Oh, that's by the time I got to Rosie Perez, I thought like that's the movie I want to see. It's like how funny, like really go inner city humor, really dig into that, and I just think that would be hysterical, and you could mine that for a lot as well, because I think of her character in White Men Can't Jump, right, where she goes on Jeopardy.
I know five foods that begin with Q.
Exactly. That becomes the character Quince. That becomes the sort of the gag, and I think you could easily make a very similar.
I like how
doctor.
How I can reference White Men Can't Jump Rosie Perez.
Who can't? Who in their 30s can't? My Deacon Frost.
Yeah, what'd you do for Deacon Frost?
My Deacon
I think
Frost,
we might. If we, I'm willing to bet that we have the same Deacon Frost.
Maybe. So my Deacon Frost never worked, to my knowledge, with Spike Lee.
Oh, okay. Well, then never mind.
But when I saw him the first time, he reminded me very strongly, especially the first time we see him, of a character from another vampire movie a couple of years before, in the late 80s, a couple of years before this supposed movie came out.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yes. Lost Boys.
That's interesting.
I just like to think he would reprise his role, basically.
I mean, yeah. I ended up going with John Turturro.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. More on him in a moment.
Yeah. Okay. John Turturro was my Deacon Frost. I feel like he's like a good, because with me, I think when Spike Lee, I'm thinking the vampires are going to be more of like the mob, the mafia, the Italians.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking that Spike Lee would do. So of course he gets John Turturro to play like these Italian guy, even though John Turturro does not look any more Italian than I do.
John Turturro is my Quinn.
Is your
Donal Logue?
Oh,
character.
okay. That's Barry Pepper for me.
Barry Pepper.
Yeah.
Remind me who that is.
He's just the character actor. He shows up in a lot of
Okay.
a lot of Spike Lee stuff. He was in 25th Hour. He was in.
Okay.
He just shows up.
I think
in a
I
lot
know.
Of stuff.
Yeah, I think I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one I was thinking of for Deacon Frost was I can't think of his name. John Leguizamo.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Worked with him in Summer of Sam.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is an underrated movie, not a very good movie, but it's a lot of people don't like it, but I think it's a very interesting movie to watch.
Yeah,
if you're gonna watch a non-Spike Lee movie, that's a very good one to watch.
Yeah, there's a few of those, and he tends to not really be obviously in his element because it really isn't this sort of stereotypical. But I appreciate that he branches out. And yeah, I agree with you. Not great, but underrated.
Yeah. So but in terms of this Italian mafia that he's working for, the Udo Kier character I got is Frank Vincent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Frank Vincent shows up in every one of his movies. I wanted to go with what's his face Sal from Do the Right Thing.
Yeah.
Danny Aiello.
Danny Aiello.
But I was like, yeah, Danny Aiello's not that. He doesn't have that mob boss type.
Little too henchman.
Yeah, henchman.
He would be good as the
too,
Donal Logue character as well.
A little too hired goon. I have to do it in every podcast. I
Hired
bring
goons.
up goons. Yeah, so that's why I ended up going with Frank Vincent on there. I think it'll be good. Is it get away from like the German like weird European vampire?
There's no reason for that in a Spike Lee joint.
No, you got an Italian vampire.
Yeah.
Oh, the Italian vampire's life would be terrible. Can't eat garlic on anything.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
That's
you
really
could play
rough.
that into the movie. That's that script.
You can
right?
work blood into the sauce, though.
Yeah.
You can still have spaghetti, you know, and in the nice red sauce.
Yeah, it's I could see the jokes being written.
Yeah.
As we speak on this. Who else are we missing? Anyone else?
I didn't cast anyone else. Those were kind of my main characters. I didn't even think about the Udo Kier character. So.
Yeah. Well, it pretty much makes sense. Yeah, that's all it pretty much. So you don't have anyone that's going to be. I could put Rosie Perez as the Tracy Lords character.
Yeah, I didn't think of her. I normally I will go with like the high profile henchman, but other than Donal Logue, I couldn't think of anyone else.
Can I ask you a question? Why did we think Tracy Lords was attractive back in the 90s?
You know what? It was the forbidden thing. It was just once we found out
that
about that
15.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Once we found out about that whole thing, she became famous for that, and that was enough.
That was enough, I guess.
For all the creeps.
Where's the Miller High Life? Where is the Miller High Life?
No more High Life. You look what we happen to buy.
No more High Life? What kind of a joint is this? How come no more High Life? Look, doctor, this ain't Korea or China or wherever you come from. You get some Miller High Life in this funky joint.
You buy another beer.
The mayor. This flying shit tastes like cold pot liquor. All right. But you asking a lot to make a man change his beer. You asking a lot, doctor.
All right, so our top three.
Doing top 3 vampire movies. It's very kind of obvious.
Oh, we were going vampire movies? Okay, I just was going by top 3 vampires. But we could do vampire movies. I'll do that as well.
All right.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that we mix it up because I do think that's a different list. And actually, I mentioned that, or I will mention that as I was sort of putting my list together last night and this morning. I think that over the course of as we're doing this podcast, I think we get maybe some of the obvious ones out of the way. Like if we watch Blade, we're going to say, top 3 vampire movies. And then, so like I was talking to my wife and she said, you should do top 3 vampire slayers. And I said, oh, well, there's 2 more Blade movies. So maybe if we get to those, we could, do something like that. Like, I think we'll get to slightly more, esoteric or like loosely associated lists that we want to kind of put together. But this is kind of an obvious one to do. But of course, I didn't know that you were not really a fan of vampire movies until you said so.
But it's okay though, because there are good vampire movies. It's just not like there's certain people that are like really into vampires, and there's certain people that are I don't want to associate with them. But
sure.
I do enjoy certain vampire. I like If it's a good movie, it's a good movie.
I was gonna say I don't like vampire movies like as a rule, where like it's a vampire movie, I'm gonna have to see it. But like I do enjoy movies, obviously, and I enjoy horror movies, obviously, and so vampires show up a lot, and I appreciate a great vampire story for all the reasons that I think that we've talked about. So
you want me to do
I guess go ahead with your number 3, whether it's your top 3 vampire or vampire movie, or
I'll go
is
with
the list the same?
It's pretty much the same. I can easily adapt it. Number 3 is the movie that you absolutely hate, and it's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I knew it.
It's my number 3 because it's not a very good movie, and I will admit it that it's not a very good movie. It's very long, but some of the performances in it are so sublimely amazing.
Yeah.
Tom Waits as Renfield.
Oh, love it. I do love that.
Gary Oldman as Count Dracula.
There are a handful of performances that I think are brilliant in that movie.
Then you have Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder in that movie.
Keanu Reeves is not one of those performances.
And you have Carrie Elwes, who's the only British actor.
Oh my god! And they cast him as the American. Oh my god! I want to strangle that movie. Do not get my blood boiling on that movie.
I absolutely. It's a very, and I like all the practical effects in it. I like that it's not very CG. There's not a lot of CG in it. There's barely any. I don't even think there is any CG in it. But I mean, it's very old school, and I kind of like it that way.
So it's interesting and it's fun, and I'm glad that you brought up. I'm glad that that you mentioned Bram Stoker's Dracula, because I certainly wasn't going to put it on my list. If I agree, if we were talking about movie vampires, specifically if we were talking about movie Draculas, I feel like
it's a Dracula run. No, he's a vampire. He's not a Dracula.
No, he's not a Dracula.
What, do you ask for Crayolas when you're drawing? No, you ask for crayons. It's you don't ask for the name brand. It's like no, I don't. I'm not Hale Corporate at all. I use facial tissues. I will photocopy my documents.
You've got to photocopy. You've got to give it to Gary Oldman.
Oh,
his Dracula is, I think, the best movie Dracula. However, that movie is a pile of garbage. I hate that movie so much.
I know you do.
And anyway, so that's why I think it is important to make a distinction in the overall movie. My number 3 is 1922's Nosferatu. I'm not one of these people. I have to go on record as saying, especially as we do this segment over more podcasts. Well, see, right. I mean, it's funny because the movie.
Watch out, Dracula! Don't drink his blood. It's an Irishman.
The movie. You can make or break that movie with the music, obviously. I mean, it's a silent movie, and it's funny. My wife had never seen it, and we watched it a couple of years ago, and whatever DVD release I got from Netflix had just, like, this 80s redo of the score that was just, like... I mean, it didn't sound 80s. No, it didn't sound like a New Order album, but it was... It was super goofy, and she was looking at me like, "What is going on?" And I'm like, "This music is terrible. I don't know what to tell you."
Should have just downloaded. Like, I know that there's
and I should have. And I think if we ever watch it again, that's a good idea.
There's a couple sites that if you're interested in, if anybody's interested in, and you want to watch like a silent movie, there's a couple sites that have either a fan-made music or fan-performed music that's for
based
silent
on the
movies
original,
that are pretty interesting to listen to.
I mean, as a rule, like I should say that I'm not one of these people who generally, like, as a rule, believes like the early version of the thing is going to be the best thing. I'm not Rolling Stone magazine. You know, I don't think like it's 1922. It's obviously going to be in my top 3. But it really is. I think the way that they portray sort of that Count Orlok character is like, it's so creepy and compelling that like they made a movie about the idea that was a real vampire. Shadow of the Vampire from the year 2000.
That's the reason why I like, if we talked about favorite screen vampires, if I was going to go with Nosferatu, before I would do who was the guy who played him in that one? Not in the 22 version. Who played him in that one? It was Shrek.
Max Shrek. Yeah.
Max Shrek, also the name of the bad guy from Batman.
Christopher Walken's
character.
Very confusing.
Max Shrek. I would actually go with probably either Willem Dafoe over that, playing him in Shadow the Vampire, or Klaus Kinski in the remake that was done by Werner Herzog.
Yeah. All good stuff. So I won't take up more time on my number 3. It's Nosferatu.
My number 2, of course, is a movie that we mentioned earlier, and that's Lost Boys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Lost Boys, I think, is fantastic. More than I love the vampires in that movie, which I do love the vampires in that movie. I love Kiefer Sutherland's mullet in that movie. It's fantastic.
Oh, yes.
But I just love the vampire lore around it. It was it's very traditional, and it's very fun. It's just and I like that it's portrayed as punk. You know, it's punk to be vampire.
Yep.
It's cool to be a vampire.
It's shirtless sex on the beach to be a vampire.
Exactly.
Is what it is.
I always think of this, Simpsons, where Bart gets transformed into the vampire, and they do like that weird Salem's Lot thing.
Yeah.
Where they're like floating outside. No, that's from Lost Boys, right?
That's from Salem's Lot.
Salem's Lot. Yeah.
The floating outside the window.
And they're like, "It's cool, Bart. We get free sodas if you say you're a vampire at the movie theater." It's like that's what I think of. Like, it's like, come on, Mikey, it's cool to be a vampire.
You didn't kill the head vampire.
Grandpa, you're that. No, it's me.
That's an honorable mention for me. I love that one. That's definitely in my top 5 if we were doing top 5, but I did not quite put it in my top 3. But I do really enjoy that movie.
What's your number 2?
My number 2 is, at the risk of having it be yet another Kevin pick, my number 2 is 2008's Let the Right One In. That is a much beloved, I think, right now.
Yeah.
I think if you're talking about the sort of the modern vampire movie, like anything made sort of post 2000, I think that's generally regarded as kind of one of the greatest right now. It's a Swedish film. It's about, if anybody hasn't seen it, it's about a 12-year-old boy who lives in this incredibly creepy apartment complex in Stockholm, Sweden, with his mother. And he befriends his local neighbor, who's a little girl about his age named Eli, who is a vampire. And so there's sort of this whole, there's a lot going on in the movie. There's, there's an investigation into the sort of the murders and the disappearances because
child
her father
abuse shit
is
going on.
Yeah, because her father is killing sort of for her because he realizes that she's a vampire and he has to, he wants to keep her alive. But of course it's, this huge burden, and both of them are lonely. The one boy is bullied at school.
Yeah.
And, I think I love this film, and it has one of my all-time favorite final scenes, which is telegraphed from space. When you see the movie and you're watching it, you know how this movie is going to end, and I won't spoil it, but as soon as you're 30 minutes into the movie, you know how the movie's going to end. But the way that it's actually directed and executed is, I think, brilliant, and it really gets at this idea of adolescent kind of loneliness, and this kid who's not a vampire, but he's bullied and he's lonely, and then and it's this wintry, horrible, endless night of Sweden, and then this girl who's also lonely, but it's because she's a vampire.
Yeah.
If you are one of those people who are not into subtitles and cannot watch foreign movies, first of all, I pity you, and I think that it's really in your best interest to expand your horizons. There's an entire planet full of art out there for you to experience, but there is a serviceable 2010 English language remake called Let Me In, which is, like I said, it's adequate. There's some decisions that it makes in the interpretation that I don't care for, and that ending scene that I love is not handled as eloquently as the original version is, but it's passable. It's acceptable.
Yeah.
If you want to watch that movie but you cannot do subtitles, at least watch Let Me In, because it will give you the gist of it, even though the nuances are not quite there. It's a little ham-handed.
Let me just I kind of figured that you were going to put this one on your list. I like it. It is, for reading subtitles, it's a slog to get through that movie.
It's very talky.
It's a very
talky movie because it is a lot about that sort of that adolescent thing, and it's not a very action-oriented it's graphic vampire movie, but it has sort of flashes of
it's a slow movie. I remember watching it and I was just like, this movie's still going on. I enjoyed it. I liked it, and
the final scene, I won't say any more about it, but in the pool, that's the one I'm talking about. Is one of my favorite things.
There's some that movie is definitely Scandinavians in general, man.
Bleakness. This is
trying to get through their movies.
It's like Ingmar Bergman's vampire
No wonder
movie.
why the suicide rate's so high in amongst the Norse countries.
God's silence. That's what it's all about. All that Kierkegaard.
All that Kierkegaard.
That's what it is.
Don't bring down this podcast by bringing up pure Kierkegaard. So my number one is, and I've already kind of mentioned it. It's Fright Night.
Yeah.
1989's Fright Night. Chris Sarandon is the vampire.
Oh.
It's a great movie because
that is a very good movie.
Because it has elements of, a Rear Window. It's like you don't know if he is a vampire, and you don't know.
It plays it very mysteriously for a long time.
Yeah, and very, very teenage angst. I mean, William Ragsdale, star of Mannequin, and Herman's Head, playing the main character. He's got to go, rescue his girlfriend, and you have Roddy McDowall playing the midnight movie monster host who learns all of the tricks on how to and it's Roddy McDowall. Who doesn't love Roddy McDowall?
Yeah.
But Fright Night is just it's one of the best.
It's a fun movie. I'm surprised to see it at number 1, but it is a fun movie.
I think it's just because out of all the vampire movies, I think that one's the most fun for me. And it's vampire movies to me should be fun. They need to be a little sexy. Chris Sarandon is obviously very sexy. He plays the neighbor who's like the mom is obsessed with him. This very sexy dude. It's great, and I even think that the remake that they did with
David Tennant,
David Tennant and Colin Farrell is not bad.
Terrible.
No.
Yeah, it was a lot of why are we not just watching the original? Because
yeah,
it's very, very similar. But I agree. Yeah, it's hard to screw that up because the central premise is so solid.
Yeah, I think that's what it is about it. It's very clever. It's very suburban. It's a very suburban horror movie.
Like Poltergeist is a very suburban horror movie.
They didn't move the bodies!
So my number 1 was going to be a Dracula, but the question was which Dracula, right? There's dozens, hundreds of different Dracula movies.
And they're all pretty bad.
That were made. I would disagree. But I went with, if I was going to pick one Dracula movie that I could watch for the rest of my life, it was going to be 1958's Horror of Dracula, aka Dracula, which I believe it was how it was released here. That's Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing.
I was gonna say, which one is that? I think it's
love
Christopher Lee.
Some Bela Lugosi, and I think Bela Lugosi has obviously that's iconic, and there's so much ode to that movie in Horror of Dracula, to anything that Christopher Lee did, but just that amount of just crazy menace, and just him with the blood on his face and the eyes, Christopher Lee, the late Christopher Lee, just completely owns that. And the way that Peter Cushing's Van Helsing kind of plays off of that, I mean, the two of them on screen together, I mean, it really is it's the same basic movie, but it really comes down to who are sort of your two leads. I generally don't care who Jonathan Harker is played by, and as long as it's not Keanu Reeves. But it all comes down to your vampire expert and your vampire.
You know who else is in that movie? Michael Gough, who plays Alfred in Batman.
Ah, see? It all comes back. We've got
Mr. Dracula, someone is waiting for
Would you like to turn into a bat and fly away over to, take the car?
Mr. Van Helsing left quite quickly. It seemed like there was an emergency. Poof.
Poof, he turns into a bat in the bat theme.
I mean, I had a couple ones that I could have put in the movie. I want to talk just a couple of my maybes, which was Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah,
one that
which I watched not too long ago. I rewatched that a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and that one Bugs Bunny cartoon where he goes to the castle in Transylvania. I think it was, I can't remember the name of it.
I think it's called Transylvania, iOS 9000 or something like that.
Transylvania 65000 was an Ed Begley Jr. comedy.
No, maybe I'm mixing up my jokes.
Yeah, I think so. But this one
something like that.
But it's the one with Dracula where he turns into the bat, and the bat's got that little top hat
and he
on.
keeps he keeps running into things and getting smashed and stuff.
Yeah, every time Bugs Bunny says abracadabra or
Right.
hocus pocus, he turns into the bat or does it, and then he's like pocus cadabra.
Right, he's got the bat head.
Yeah, Walla Walla Washington, and he turns into a bird.
No, that's great. Yeah.
Like that's like the silliness of vampire movies to me.
Yeah. No, I love it.
Rita, is that you? He's here! He's here!
This must be Pearl, the record keeper.
He's going to kill me! You need me, Frost! You need me!
Pearl, your history. Have the good grace to die with some fucking dignity.
Frost!
Congratulations, Blade.
Frost.
I hear you've been looking for me. I'm flattered.
It'll pass.
All right, so final thoughts and grade on Blade.
You know, are we?
Yeah, we're recording.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I sounded weird all of a sudden. You know, I didn't hate it. I mean, I liked it. I think that it was such a mixed bag that there was so much that I, didn't like, and then a lot that I liked. In general, I think Blade was great. I think it was really fun to watch. Like, even though he was very sort of dour, very Christian Bale in Batman Begins, just very like. Ugh.
Yeah, that's what I didn't think I mentioned that during the recap, but I kept on I was doing the voice. It was very Batman.
It was just the Batman voice. Yeah. So I mean, I generally came down basically. We do letter grades, and if it was I generally on Letterboxd, which if you go on Letterboxd, by the way, I'll say this now, and you look up my my username, which is the same as my Twitter handle at kwhitesays, I keep a list of all of the movies that we review with links in the comments of those to the podcast episodes. So if you want to catch up or you just want to remember what movies we did or leave any comments, that would be awesome. But they do a 5-star system allowing for half stars. So if we go back to the 10-star system, I mean, I can't help it. We're right. I was right dead in the middle. 2.5 stars out of 5, 5 stars out of 10. I'll give it about a C+. All
right.
This was about as middle of the road for me as you can possibly get. I liked as much as I hated.
As much as I wanted to not like this film, because I think the reviews are the podcast is a lot funnier when I don't like a movie. I actually quite liked it. I was shocked at how much I enjoyed this film, a movie from 1998 that I did not have any fond memories of. Like, this is not a movie that I remember seeing in the theater and I was getting a handy during the show. There was none of that. There was none of that teenage this was right. I was 17 when this movie came out. There was none of that for me when I was watching this. However,
Blade was not a part of your sexual awakening. Your coming of age.
My own personal Scandinavian movie. No, it was, and watching it, I liked it quite a bit. I gave it a B+.
Wow.
And
full grade higher.
Yeah. I mean, this is I think this is the most recent one that we've really disagreed on.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy the directing. I liked all of the Wesley Snipes' acting is Wesley Snipes, but. Yeah. You could have literally put anyone in that part, and you probably would have played it the same, with the exception of Nicolas Cage. And a Nicolas Cage Blade would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed all of it. I enjoyed the pacing. I thought everything worked well. I liked the plot. The plot, aside from the whole blood god thing, but they kind of hinted at it earlier with it. The A led to B, led to C, led to D. I mean, there wasn't any major leaps of logic in the movie. There was some super magic medicine in it, but whatever,
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think that there was some. I think that the lack of humor really brought it down for me. I think if it was funnier, maybe not Guardians of the Galaxy funnier, but
no, just didn't take itself as seriously.
Yeah,
that was my major issue.
But
it was very dour in a lot of scenes where some levity would have come in handy.
It's David Goyer, man.
Yeah, I guess.
Look at Man of Steel.
I tried not to. I did once. I guess we're going to do it again.
Maybe sometime. Anyway, go to PlanetArbitrary.com for all your Planet Arbitrary needs. You can follow me on Twitter at Planet Arbitrary. You can follow Kevin at KWhiteSays. Like our Facebook page, Planet Arbitrary Podcast Facebook page. You could also like the Game Classy Facebook page, which is the home of our sister podcast, Game Classy, which has me and Steve reviewing tabletop games. Also on this podcast feed, you can find the Play On podcast, which is all about video games, where Steve from Game Classy and Pat of Pat's Retro Video Game Reviews discuss video games. Yay! Kevin, you have a letterbox website?
I do, yeah. If you go on Letterboxd, it's letter, the LETTERBOXD.com. It's a cool website for if you're one of those obsessive people who likes to keep track of all of the movies you watch and what you thought of them. It's a great website for that. You can find me also on there at K White Says. And like I said, I do keep a list. I keep many lists. You can see what I thought of the last several years worth of movies, but you can also find the running list of all of the movies that we've watched and comment on those and find links to the website with all of the episodes that we've done so far.
All right. And finally, the best thing you can do to help the podcast is comment, subscribe on iTunes. You could also, if you don't like listening in any other way possible, you could listen to us on YouTube, on the Planet Arbitrary YouTube page.
Which is completely useless, and why are you doing that?
Yeah, I have no idea, but people like it. They demanded it of me, so I did it. So, Kevin, until next time.
God damn it, Blade.
God damn it, Blade.
Comic book logic.